Hey everyone, so we're back with the fifth installment of Harry Potter. That would be Order of the Phoenix. And this is where things get interesting as, well, from the fourth book, Goblet of Fire, you start seeing that there are more more to the world than just the school. It's not just what happens in Hogwarts. There's kind of like another life that happens outside of the school itself. Now, on the fifth book, this is where things really take a turn. We transition from just between school and then back at home for the summer to now things get real. So now we have that interaction with the school as a magical place, but also the wizarding world as another place. With Harry, we see that he is isolated once again, with the Dursleys, and he's trying to get as much news that he can on the magical world and on Voldemort and the Death Eaters. He's looking through the newspapers. He's kind of glancing, not really reading, the Daily Prophet, which is the the major newspaper in Great Britain for the magical world. And he's also scouring the news. Even Uncle Vernon is kind of weirded out, saying, "You have no business. I mean, if Dudley doesn't care for the news, there's no reason why you should." So, yeah, like that's a great comparison. But yeah, and so on one occasion, he was actually caught listening to the news. He was actually outside, um, kind of hidden by the flower bed over in the front garden. And as he was listening to the news, there was this large crack, and that caused him to kind of jump up. But because of the large crack and where Harry was hiding, he was able to listen to the news because he was actually underneath a window. So at that same time, Uncle Vernon opened the window. Harry jumped up. He hit his head, and all he knew was that Harry was ending up with his wand drawn out, and so he had to run away from there because, yeah, you don't want to confront an angry Vernon. And so Harry's just walking around. Uh, he crosses Dudley, who is out with his gang. And Dudley, at this point, he is kind of like this boxing champion at his school. So he's being more of a bully than ever before. Funny enough, as a bully, he is picking on smaller children. Harry also does make a note of, "Oh, yeah, you were probably picking on some 10-year-old." And what does Dudley respond? He deserved it. I mean, children can be annoying sometimes, but do they really deserve a beating? I mean, anyways. So at this point, this is where there's also like this discrepancy between the movie and the book. Now, with the book, you kind of get to see Harry and Dudley, and there's this change in their relationship because they're both getting older, and Harry is no longer as afraid as he used to be with Dudley, but Dudley is also not as confrontational. He prefers to kind of avoid Harry, and if he can, he'll try not to uh, bother him as much. Not out of respect, but because of the whole magical thing that he prefers to avoid. So it's less about fear, and it's more about he's been taught that magic is wrong, so he prefers to avoid Harry because he represents magic. And so the thing about Harry is that during the whole course of the summer, or up to now, the few news that he's been getting from Hermione and Ron are very brief messages and not very specific. I mean, clearly they're both in the same place together, but his assumption is that they're having fun without him and that he's being kept out of the loop. Um, Messages from Hermione, from Ron, even from Sirius, are basically, "Oh, we are, we're hiding. We can't really tell you anything else," or "It's very dangerous. We can't tell you what is really going on," or even Sirius with his be good, keep your head and stay cool, don't do anything unrational. And so that's where Harry gets very frustrated, because he's the one that saw Voldemort, right? He's the one who saw what was going on. He was there. He had to fight him. He feels that he's right. I mean, he feels that he is entitled to be put up to date, especially with a danger who Voldemort wants to kill him. So he has a right to know what's going on. But that's not what's happening. He's being kept in the dark, so to say. And so with this pent up frustration, he is also kind of losing his patience. So he's trying to keep himself cool. He's not trying to pick a fight with Dudley. He's just trying to keep his temper. But, Dudley does kind of... I don't know what's going on with Dudley precisely. But, he still pokes Harry. He triggers him into losing his temper. And so at this point, the gang has already gone home, right? So it's just Dudley and Harry. And one of the funny things is that, well, not funny, but one of the things that happens is that at that moment when Harry loses his temper, he does draw his wand. He does have it pointing at Dudley, but then something happens. Everything grows dark. It goes cold. Something's happening, and it's supposed to be like a summer. It's a hot summer night. So what exactly is going on? Well, we soon come to find out that it's because there's, I believe there's like 2 Dementors there, and the 2 Dementors, and this is where it's kind of interesting, because Dementors, if you remember, they feed on happiness. And so they leave you only feeling with despair, with fear. But Dudley, being the bully that he is, and the brat that, he got everything he wanted, and he still gets everything he's wanted. And, he's the one that gets the best treatment and all of this. Well, the only thing that he would potentially have are good memories, good thoughts. Well, that's not true. I mean, something is clearly happening with Dudley. And he gets so scared that he even, he thinks that's Harry doing something. And despite Harry saying, I'm not doing anything, be quiet, I'm trying to listen to what's going on, he gets a punch from Dudley. And that's when, Harry manages to do the Expecto Patronum, the charm that protects against the Dementors. He chases them away. And then it comes about that his neighbor, Mrs. I do not remember her name, but their neighbor that has basically been babysitting Harry when the Dursleys are not at home, she kind of reveals herself to be a squib, a person who was born from a magical family, from a witch, from a wizard, but they themselves can't do magic. And so she reveals herself to be an actual agent of Dumbledore's, that she has been set there from the very beginning to keep an eye on Harry. And the reason why she couldn't make Harry feel very comfortable is that because if the Dursleys found out that he was comfortable with her, they might not let him go back. Now, I'm spending too much time here in the beginning, but it is important to set up to the point where, because Harry did magic, this is where a series of events take place. So you have, because Harry did magic in front of a Muggle, regardless that it was because he was protecting himself, regardless because it was in front of his cousin, who already knows that he is a wizard, he still gets cited. Why? Because, again, if you do magic in front of a Muggle, then you're revealing the magical world, and that could put the magical world in a dangerous position. So, if we know anything and we remember from what happened from the second book, Chamber of Secrets, they have something that's called a trace, and they can detect when an underage witch or wizard does magic. But here's the thing, they don't detect that they are doing the magic. they only detect that there's magic being done around the underage witch or wizard. Meaning that, let's say, if you have a magic family, witches and wizards, and then you have this young child, and they're doing magic around that child, not necessarily for the child, but just doing magic, doing anything, then the trace will activate. But since they're with their parents or their family, and it's assumed that they are being taken care of and that they're up, taking stock on things. So it's not that, every time the trace is detected, then that child will get in trouble. However, when we're talking about a child who has magic, who can do magic, and is from a non-magical family, then they might keep an eye, and especially if that child already knows that they're a witch or wizard, then that's where things get more in trouble, because they're aware and there's no way around them to supervise them, so they take more firm action. Now, what happened in the Chamber of Secrets is that when the house elf, Dubby, when he performed his magic inside with the Dursleys, the trace was detecting that the magic, not that it was Dubby or Harry doing the magic, it was just in general. Magic was being done in around where Harry is. So all this to say that trace doesn't pick up who cast the magic or what kind of magic. It's just, magic was used. Harry gets cited, and he gets an out saying that they're going to go they're going to basically go and remove his wand and destroy it, and that he has been suspended, which is a very harsh punishment, really, because it's the second warning. The first one being, when was it? The first one being at Chamber of Secrets, because he also does magic accidentally. He accidentally turns his entourage into a balloon, basically, if you remember from Prisoner of Azkaban. But in that occasion, the manager had told him, "Hey, it's okay, because people lose their tempers and it's not a big deal." But this time, it is a big deal for some reason, which I'll get to a little bit later on, and not too later on, because I don't want to prolong this too much. But Harry has a hearing. Dumbledore manages to kind of defuse the situation, so they're not going to destroy his wand. He is not suspended or expelled from school, not yet, but he will have a hearing. So while the Dursleys are out a few days later, and that's kind of another thing, it's a quick note I want to make. So when Harry returns with Dudley, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, they do notice that there's something odd with Dudley. And so what they come to find out is that Dudley was basically, there was after effects from their confrontation with Dementors. And it's kind of a weird thing how Harry tried to explain what Dementors are to Uncle Vernon. He was trying to explain that it's not that they're like physical entities, and it's not like you can do the 1-2 punch with them. That there has to be like an actual spell, and that there was magic, but it wasn't magic towards Dudley. It was to protect them from the Dementors. Petunia, she does weirdly remember that they guard the Azkaban, the prison, the magical prison of Azkaban, and this is actually like something that we'll turn back to on the next book. She recalls that what the Dementors do, just because there was a boy. I'll leave it at that. A boy had told Lily, her sister or Harry's mother, he had told Lily about the Dementors, and she overheard it. So that's kind of like type of thing that we'll get back to in the next book. And so, Uncle Vernon gets into like this discussion and rage with Harry. Things were getting sorted out with the Ministry. So they ended up that Harry was just relegated into his room, no access to his luggage or anything magical. Uncle Vernon and Petunia, they leave along with Dudley. They leave one day for there was supposed to be like an event because apparently Uncle Vernon had won a prize for the garden, and so while they were gone, Harry receives a visit, which is basically Mad Eye Moody and this team of wizards, of Aurors, I should say. And so they leave. They go to this secret location, which is Grimmauld Place, and oh boy, if you're not familiar, Grimmauld Place is Sirius's home. It turns out that with Voldemort being back and the Death Eaters now being more active, they have kind of relocated everybody to this headquarters for the Order. Who is the Order, you would ask? Well, during the times of the Death Eaters and Lord Voldemort, the way to counterattack them, because in the Ministry you had people that were being under the Imperious Curse, that was being, controlled by another wizard. You had people that were acting out of fear. So there was a lot of kind of espionage double agents in the Ministry, so you couldn't really rely on them. So Dumbledore formed this group called the Order of the Phoenix, and they were the ones who were mainly fighting off against Voldemort and the Death Eaters in a more effective way than the Ministry ever could. Again, because of the double agents and people, acting out of fear and all of that. And so Harry, when he arrives, he is kind of astonished because, first of all, you do have to be told about the place before you can actually see the place. And it's something called the Fidelia Charm. Now, if you recall, and I probably didn't name it as such, but the Fidelius Charm, it's a protective charm where you have a safe place, and you have somebody called the secret keeper. If that secret keeper doesn't reveal the location, by no magic can anybody operate or see the place or, find themselves in that place. And with Harry's parents, their house was actually placed under Fidelia Charm. But as you recall, the secret keeper was not Sirius. It had been Peter Pettigrew. So when Peter Pettigrew had revealed the location to Voldemort, he was finally able to reach the Potters and kill Harry's parents. So that's the situation. If under Fidelia's Charm, if the secret keeper does not reveal the location to you, you have no way of going in. And you actually have no way of fighting the place. Be it magical means or by walking around. Anything. And so Harry gets revealed the location. He is able to go in. He finds the Order. And the thing about this book is that Harry is angry. I feel that the movie didn't really do it that much justice. But in the book, Harry gets really angry and he loses his temper very easily. I mean, when he finds Hermione and Ron, he just basically goes off saying, you guys are having fun, you didn't write anything, I've been all alone, I deserve it, I deserve to know more than you two, and blah, blah, blah. He does loses it. And people notice, and during the whole book, it is hard on, it puts a strain on the relationship with Ron and Hermione, because any single thing will trigger Harry. And again, I understand from Harry's standpoint, but still, it's, take it easy. They are your friends, and they're not the ones that are keeping secrets from you. Because, again, even though it's the headquarters, Ron and Hermione have nothing to do with the Order. They're there for safekeeping, yes, because Molly and Arthur are now a part of the Order. However, they are not in the Order. So Ron and Hermione have no idea what's going on. And here's kind of like the one other thing that I find that the movie doesn't really make mention, doesn't do it justice. But it kind of happens around the same time. And it starts from this point all the way to the book, to the end of the book. Fred and George have been making their own supplies. It's this is not the only time. From book two, we see signs that they're kind of creating their own inventions and their own products, but now they actually have the money for the products. When Harry won the Troy tournament, the galleons that he won, he didn't want anything to do with them, so he gave them to Fred and George. And because Fred and George have now the money, they've been actually putting their products into production, and they're creating them. So, such as the puke and pastel, and other candies that are supposed to get you to get out of class, but then you can reverse the effects, and now you're good. Now you have more free time to play or do whatever you need to do. And so, with their inventions, one of their inventions is actually this extendable ear, where you can drop it and it will pick up the sound from where you're wanting to listen. And that's kind of what they do. They kind of lower the ear from the stairs to the door where the order is having their meeting, so they get to hear a few things, not that much really. Now, if we jump a little bit forward, Harry does get some information. He's told during dinner that, oh, this is the Order of Phoenix, this is how it started, blah, blah, blah. And Sirius feels that, and it's not just Sirius, but a few of the people there feel that Harry needs to know, is entitled to know up to a certain point. Now, Molly doesn't want Harry to know anything because he's too young. He's too young to be in the Order. But nonetheless, they do explain to Harry that what they're doing right now is that Voldemort is being active right now, but he's still hiding. They suspect that he is looking for something that he didn't have before. Possibly a weapon. What the weapon would be, they don't know. And that's where they leave it. Because anything else is not just speculation, but that would be kind of more information than Harry should know. Not because he's not entitled to it, but because it has more to do with their planning and their own activities that you don't want people to find out. So you want to keep those things a secret. And Molly, she is brilliant. I mean, Ron's mom is brilliant in that the way that she kind of keeps them all busy during the summer, or what's left of the summer, is by having them, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Fred and George, everybody, basically, is to clean up the house. Because Grimmauld Place has been empty for many years. Even before Sirius had gone to Azkaban, the place had been going into decay. And so, by being busy, they didn't have time to actually gather and discuss about what was going on or what could it be. Molly looked into it. Now, on the day of Harry's hearing, Harry gets up. He's a little bit nervous because depending on the results of the hearing, he might go back to school or he's no longer going to school. Now, and that's a scary thing because he's no longer with his friends. He's no longer learning magic. He's no longer going to be able to defend himself, right? And so when he goes to the hearing, it turns out that the hearing has been changed in terms of time and place. And instead of being... And I think I should explain a little bit more. So, when we talk about the Ministry of Magic, the Ministry is located in London. And in London, there is this location where you can access it through either like toilets or the subway or a telephone booth. I mean, there's several locations where you can go in. The Ministry is huge. Funny thing, and I find this interesting because it's you learn a little bit more background about the Ministry and how it works and everything. For example, I think it was Arthur who makes a mention that they used to have owls sending office messages throughout the whole Ministry, but the droppings got so bad that the mess was incredible. That's how he explained it. It was so much mess that they decided instead to charm the notes into like paper airplanes type. and that's how messages get flown around in the ministry. It would be quicker if they could use telephones. For some reason, they don't. Go figure. But we don't have time to go through the whole ministry. But basically, Harry has to now go, which he's late to his hearing. He has to go to the dungeons, and he is seen by the full court, the ministers, the full court of ministers, right? And they're ready for him. And he's being trialed as if he were a felon, a criminal, you know. And fortunately, Dumbledore gets there, and he's able to kind of stand up for Harry, even though he doesn't look at him. And that's kind of like the common thing throughout the whole book. Harry gets frustrated because he's not being privy to certain information, and then Dumbledore also is not as warm to Harry as he used to be, and there's no explanation at that point as to why. And so Harry gets frustrated with Dumbledore. He also gets frustrated with the situation. Dumbledore, caring for Harry, he doesn't get too close. He's not too close to him in this book. And so Harry will try to do things his way. And it's partially because he feels that he has to, because of the situation of, you know, the ministry against him, and then Lord Voldemort and all that. But also he is frustrated. I can't stop reiterating this word. He gets frustrated and angry all the time. And so his actions are not always rational. Fast forward throughout the court. They do bring in Mrs. Fig. That's her name. Mrs. Fig, the neighbor. And I'll just insert this tiny note in which you start also seeing this kind of supremacy. It sounds like a big word, but there is a sense of supremacy among witches and wizards that can do magic, as opposed to those who can't do magic, or even muggles, or even compared to the other magical creatures. There is this kind of small movement where they believe that witches and wizards are the only intelligent beings that can perform magic. So not centaurs, not hippogriffs, not house elves, no one. Just humans who are witches or wizards. And even if you're human, if you're a muggle, you are below witches and wizards. So there is this type of supremacy thought when it comes to magic. And you can see it in this hearing. The way that they address themselves to Mrs. Fig. Because Mrs. Fig can't do magic. She's a squib. And when they address her, it's, oh, can squibs see Dementors? Oh, prove it. And there's this attitude towards her. Not everyone. I'll repeat, not everyone. But Fudge and even this minister called Dolores Umbridge. I mean, they're just vicious to her. Dumbledore obviously doesn't allow this to happen, so they get along. But at the end of the hearing, Harry does get dropped from all charges, because there is suspicion to believe that, okay, maybe there were Dementors there. Harry had to use magic, so it wasn't really a breach in the code of magic, which apparently Dumbledore partially helped create. And so, if we fast forward to the school year, there's this animosity between Harry and Draco, which is, if it was bad before, now it's getting worse and worse. It's many magnitudes worse than before. And so we see that because this time around Dumbledore wasn't able to actually hire a Defense Against Dark Arts instructor or professor, well, right before the school year, or right before the school term started, the ministry passed a law, a decree, which says that in case Hogwarts isn't able to, the headmaster of Hogwarts isn't able to hire someone for a position, they will hire the position. They will hire somebody for that position. And in this case, because Dumbledore was not able to secure any structure for defense against dark arts, now we have Dolores Umbridge, who is now the professor of defense against the dark arts. So Professor Umbridge, she is nasty. And I don't mean that like in a physical sense, but she is a nightmare. Between the and which is like the iconic hums or interruptions that she does. I mean, I think now in the vernacular in society, we have something called Karens. She was the primordial Karen before Karens were a thing. That it's that extreme. And oh boy. To start off, Hermione immediately picks up that something is off. Because in her speech, she does say, we have to avoid changing what doesn't need changing. Innovation for progress itself is not good, something like that. Hermione picks up right away what the meaning is. And even the other professors also get on the meaning of her speech, which happened at the beginning of the term. Where Professor Umbridge was basically saying, we from the ministry are not going to allow anything to change in the school. You are not going to change anything. Everything is going to stay the same. And we will interfere with Hogwarts. And that's exactly what's happening. And that exactly happens. She starts by not teaching them actually how to defend themselves in the class. They're just reading theory in books. And that's that. I mean, they can't cast a spell or anything because under her logic, if you learn the theory, then you can do the magic later on. And you only need to do enough to actually pass the OWLs, which are the ordinary wizardry level exams. Exams? Ordinary wizardry level exam. Anyways. So the OWL exams, right? Which is the test that Harry in his 5th year, they're going to be doing. They're going to be taking. Everybody in 5th year takes this type of test. And for their 7th year, they take newts. So that's the nasty... I'll have to look it up. I think newts was like nasty, extraordinary... No. Okay, here it is. Newt. Nastily exhausting wizarding test. So the NEWT. Yeah, but that you take on your last year in Hogwarts. On your 7th year. Oh boy. I'm not going to edit this out, but yeah. Your last year is your 7th year. You're only there for 7 years. Okay. Anyways, moving on. So, again, Harry is having this hard time because now Professor Umbridge is clearly targeting him. She does raise his tempers. He loses it. And I think this happens in the first class. But he does lose his temper enough saying, no, it's not a lie. Because Professor Umbridge was saying, it's all a lie. You've been hearing that a certain wizard is back. That's not true. Blah, blah, blah. And when Harry loses his temper, he says, no, it's not a lie. It's true. Voldemort is back. She gets furious, but she kind of keeps it reeled in together and says, you are going to detention. Now, what type of detention? This is the nasty part. So when Harry goes to detention with Professor Umbridge, he is forced to write lines, I must not tell lies, over and over again. However, he has to write the lines with this special quill that Professor Umbridge has. And this quill actually uses your blood. And so every time you write a line, it's like you're digging in one part of your skin. In Harry's case, it kind of digs into his dorsal side of the hand, of his left hand, because I think he's right hand. So every time he writes, on the back of his left hand, you see what he is writing. And because he has to write the lines over and over, every time he does that, the words get kind of turned deeper and deeper. So he starts bleeding, in essence. That is a harsh physical, punishment. Even if it were any other physical, any form of physical punishment, you shouldn't do physical punishment on students. Who does that? Well, apparently this nasty old lady does. So she starts, bringing up trouble, having, basically, because she works with Fudge, and she is kind of like a spy for Fudge in certain ways, they start issuing several decrees based on what she reports back. And so she gets into this position that they made up called Inquisitor, where she's allowed to kind of rate her fellow teachers. And that causes problems because, again, they are not a fan of anybody who is not a witch or wizard. And so, for example, Hagrid, who, as we have learned previously, he's half wizard, half giant, that constitutes in their books as, one, he's not intelligent, and two, he has no business having magic, and three, we have to get rid of him. He's beneath us. That's the mentality that Professor Umbridge and Fudge have towards anybody different from them. I know. If there's any parallels to real life, yeah. Think about that. And this was written when? 2004, 2002? We'll leave that aside. And so, as the year goes on, Harry does find himself that there's too many restrictions. Professor Umbridge is making too many decrees and too many restrictions on the students, to the point that at one point, actually, Professor Dumbledore has to leave the school. But we'll actually touch on that in just a bit. So, a way to kind of combat the situation, because he's not the only one being punished in this way, and there's other repercussions. With the help of Ron and Hermione, they form something called the Dumbledore's Army. Now, originally they weren't called that. They didn't have a name. But the thought that Hermione had was, well, if we're not learning to defend themselves and there's actual danger outside, we need to learn. That's kind of like the main objective. Learn how to defend ourselves. And so they are not the only ones interested. And they know this because they're still in contact with everybody else. While Harry, because of how he's being outcasted, not just by Professor Umbridge, but, again, the Ministry of Magic, the Daily Prophets, because of the Ministry of Magic, they are spreading lies about, oh yeah, Harry is a nasty liar and blah, blah, blah. He's crazy, don't believe him. Oh yeah, that Potterhead. So you can see that Harry feels isolated because there's people that they want to know, but they don't know what actually happened with Cedric Diggory. They only know that Harry said that he died, but they don't understand what actually happened. And so they want to believe him, but then you have the news, you have the ministry, you have people like Professor Umbridge going against Harry. So who do you believe? What do you think? Right? So when Hermione had first presented the idea of teaching, Harry teaching other students, he didn't agree. But he would spend the time kind of thinking on the lesson plan and all of that. So he does really soon turn around and say, you know what, I will participate in your idea. I will do this. And so in the next Hogsmeade visit, I think it's the first one of the year, they go to this location called the Hog's Head, which is basically the same as the Three Broomsticks. So it's kind of like a pub, except that there's more shady people in it. And even that, there's almost not that many people, actually. So we have that the turnaround for this meeting is more than they expected. Harry only expected like a few people, but Ron and Hermione had made a point that it's not just them. Harry should be teaching as many students as possible, as they want, right? So they had told students from Hufflepuff, students from Ravenclaw, obviously students from their own house, Gryffindor. I think nobody from Slytherin went because they're not really on board with anything, right? Basically, the unpopular opinion, they'll go with the unpopular opinion, unless it suits them. Again, no parallels. What? I didn't say anything. And so now we go back, and in this meeting, the people that are present, they're there for one clear reason, as you expect. They're not necessarily there to arrange for classes, but they do want to know from Harry his story. What exactly happened? Not just that he was saying, yeah, Voldemort is back, or Voldemort killed Cedric. They want to know the whole story. And Harry quickly realizes this, and he again starts to lose his temper. But he does explain that if they're only there for his story, he is not going to go over it. They can leave. If they're there for the actual meeting, then, they're welcome to stay. In the end, nobody left. They all stayed. And I think in part, they were inspired by Harry. Because Harry starts painting the picture that he didn't do anything on his own. That everything that they believe and everything that they knew. Because remember, from the very first year, he rescued the Philosopher's Stone. On the second year, he solved the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. He even saved Ginny. On the third year, what did he do that was memorable in the third year? Who knows? But he has done several things on his accord, right? And so when the other students start pointing out, oh, but you did this and you did that, Harry's quick to point out, no, I did not do this on my own. I had a lot of luck and I had a lot of help. Harry goes on to this speech about, it's what you read on the book in the books and what you do in school is very much different in real life. When you're actually fighting for your life, how much you read, how good you are at casting spells, that has nothing to do, because in real life, things happen, and there is that. You can easily die, just like Cedric did. And so they were inspired. I mean, they got really inspired by his speech. And so from then on, they came to name themselves as Dumbledore's Army. They did find a location for Dumbledore's Army, which was in the book, it was Dobby who mentions this location. In the movie, they put Neville as the one. Dobby doesn't really show up in the fifth book, but the fifth movie. But he does show up in the book. So there's this room called the Room of Requirements, and the preface to this room is that Dumbledore on one occasion had told Harry that he had needed a bathroom, a restroom, and it was really urgent, and he happened to stumble upon this beautiful restroom that was elegantly furnished, with, I think he said gold, or it was just a really nice bathroom, but he could no longer find it. And it was one of the secrets of Hogwarts. That secret of Hogwarts, in particular, is the Room of Requirements. The Room of Requirements, it's located nearby where the entrance to the kitchens are. And what it is that you have to walk by this location or this wall, this specific part of a wall, a few times, and then you have to concentrate on what you really want from the room. And a door will open, you open it, and it has exactly what you need. And that's what happened. Dobby explains this to Harry. Harry goes down, he finds the room, and he finally has a location. And so that's how they spend their time. Between the classes and Quidditch and everything else, Harry starts teaching them how to defend themselves. He starts with Expelliarmus and then Stupefy and then all these different spells. And they actually got to the point where they also learn how to do a Patronus Charm. And not just do a Patronus Charm, but an actual corporeal Patronus Charm. If you're wondering what that's about, in one of the chapters, and I believe it was in that first meeting actually, one of the students there asked Harry, "Can you do a corporeal Patronus?" Harry had heard that word before, and that was at the hearing that he had at the ministry. And apparently, that minister who had asked that question was the student's. It was her aunt. And so a corporeal Patronus is just basically your Patronus Charm has this body. It has this physical manifestation. It's not just like a mist or a cloud. So, for example, Harry, his Patronus takes the shape of a stag. Well, because it has a shape, he is casting a corporeal Patronus. So, they all managed to do this. I think for Hermione, it was another. For Luna Lovegood, it was a rabbit. And that's kind of like another interesting character, because I believe part of the backstory of Luna, and Luna Lovegood, she's a member of the Ravenclaw house. She is in the same year as Ginny. She's kind of odd in the sense that she believes in like different things that many consider to be like not real. You know, it's kind of like you say, "Oh yeah, I believe in fairies." Well, she's kind of the same way. Well, and because of that, they know her as Loony Lovegood instead of Luna. They make fun of her. They even hide her stuff away from her. Like, people can be mean. Well, Luna, interesting enough, she, well, I guess I could mention it a little bit. So at the beginning of the term, when they're going to the castle from the train station, they have to get on carriages, and the carriages, they seem to be pulled by magic. But Harry sees that there's like these creatures that are like horses, but they have bat wings, and then they're very skeletal, and they look very spooky. And nobody else seemed to notice, but Luna does notice. So there's that. And with Luna, she in the book, she doesn't get too much attention. I think in the movie they do kind of put her in a little bit more. And some of the points that she makes at the very end of the book, it's not her, it's in the movie she does say them. She does say those lines like in the middle of the movie. But yeah, Luna Lovegood, her Patronus is a jackrabbit. For Ron, I think it's kind of like a terrier, I think. Anyway, so they do eventually get to that. There was also like this thing between Harry and Cho Chang, who he has had a crush since book 4, but since she was dating Cedric Diggory, then things got kind of weird. She's crying all the time. That failed. She made a scene during Valentine's at a Hogsmeade visit. That was a disaster. It's not worth mentioning at all. If we go to the very end of the book, Harry does realize that there's something going on, right? So he discovers that there is something called, well, not called, but there is a prophecy. And not just that, but, well, and I should have mentioned this before, but he's been having dreams where he is walking down a dark corridor, and at the very end there's this door that he wants to reach for some reason, but he's not exactly able to ever reach it or open it. And that has been kind of bothering him throughout the whole school year. Now, Harry also is beginning to feel certain things, I should say. So, and this kind of ties in with what happens later on in book 6, book 7. But the thing with Harry, and it sounds like I'm going all over the place, but is that we're already going on about at the hour, so and trying to keep the short much shorter. So I'm gonna have to do some editing. Anyway, so what I was saying, right? Got it. So, now that I've lost my train of thought, what was it? Okay, got it. So, you say with Harry again, he loses his temper very easily in this book, right? So, several things happen, and it's kind of goes back to his scar, because the reasoning about what's happening with his scar, that why Harry would feel a pain in his scar and all this, is that it would warn him about what Voldemort was doing. However, the thing about that is that they know that Voldemort is now out and about. So when Harry says that his scar is hurting, it's kind of expected, and it's not taking that seriously. But because Ron and Hermione, they're concerned, but they don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with his scar. Harry is feels discouraged from actually talking to Dumbledore, who has been ignoring him this whole time. And so one night he wakes up, and his dream was basically he was a snake, and he was in this dark place which he recognizes as the Ministry. There's this figure on the ground, and he gets this urge to bite this lump. So he attacks whatever's on the ground, and as he is attacking, he sees that it's Arthur Weasley. And so Arthur, he's in pain, he's being bitten and all of this. And he feels that it's not just a dream. So when he wakes up, he immediately goes to Professor McGonagall. And this is, I believe, before their Christmas break. So they're not precisely ready to end for Christmas, but they're getting there. And so he explains to Professor McGonagall that he has to talk to Professor Dumbledore, that there's something going on, and explains that he saw Arthur getting attacked by a snake and all this. Well, it causes a shock. And so he immediately goes over to Professor Dumbledore along with Ron, and I think Ginny and the rest also are there, except for Hermione. And so once he reaches Professor Dumbledore's office, he starts getting this sensation of not just anger, but also that he wants to bite Professor Dumbledore. And the reason and the thing is that it's not something that he would usually do. And that's kind of like the point. There's something inside Harry, and it's not just the anger. But just remember that for the next part of the series, okay? There's something not right. But I promise you that Harry's not turning into a cannibal. Not at all. Well, it comes to be that, Arthur was indeed attacked by a snake, so he was in danger. And because Harry had warned them, they were able to get him help. So they do visit him at the magical hospital, and then they spend their time in Grimmauld Place, which means that Sirius was going to have company, and has company. Because Sirius, again, he is wanted still, so he cannot leave Grimmauld Place. He has to stay at the headquarters. And what's worse is that if he gets captured, because he's a member of the Order, then that can compromise the whole operation in and of itself. So he is basically quarantined indefinitely, and he's not that happy. But he has company, so now he's happy. Until they need to leave, then he gets unhappy again. And so this, again, I don't think I am doing much justice to this book, because again you get a glimpse on not just the school but on the whole wizarding world. There is a gift that it's either Mad-Eye Moody or Sirius. In the movie it's Sirius, but in the book it's Mad-Eye Moody who in was it Christmas or when? He gives Harry this picture with the original members of the Order. And obviously Molly and Arthur are not there because they weren't in the Order at the beginning. At the first time, I should say. But he does see his parents, he sees Neville's parents, all of that. And when Mad-Eye goes about kind of remembering, oh yeah, he got blasted by this person. Oh yeah, he got killed by this other person. Oh yeah, he was tortured, or these two were tortured almost to madness, and so forth. There were so many lives that were lost, and so many families that were affected. And so you start seeing that it's not just that the wizarding world was at war with itself, but many lives were harmed. Not just the people that died, not just the people that got hurt, but the families, the friends, the aftermath was much greater. And that is part of the fear that the wizarding community has. That if Voldemort comes back, that suffering, that pain will come back. And ultimately, it's a war, it's a scar that never heals. When Harry and everybody starts, when they visit Arthur in the hospital, in the wizarding hospital, because of the snake attack, which apparently the venom didn't allow the wounds to close, so they had to find other methods. There is a wing that is dedicated to, I think it's called Magical Melodies, or it's basically it's basically a ward for people who have lost their mind, in essence. As they pass by it, they do see a familiar face. The formerly Professor Lockhart, who, if you remember in the book 2, he loses his memory and basically is like a child, most likely. So he's there just to not hurt himself, because again, he can still perform magic. It's just that he doesn't remember that he can, and he doesn't even remember who he is. But it's kind of nice that he gets things to do, because his fans still remember him, so they'll send him letters and he answers back. But he doesn't know who they are or why they're sending him letters, so he's kind of occupied with that. And that's what happens. Like, he's giving Harry and everybody pictures and all that. And the nurse thinks that's kind of cute for some reason and allows them to go in. I mean, apparently they don't have HIPAA. Anyway, so when they're in that ward for the people who have lost their minds, we find what... It's probably one of the saddest things in the series, because if you remember from the third book, Neville lives with his grandmother, and he has always lived with his grandmother since an early age. The reason for this is that Neville's parents, they're not dead, but they were members of the Order of the Phoenix. They were Aurors as well, and they were victims to an attack by Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix had performed a Cruciatus curse on them, which causes a lot of pain. She tortured them so much that they no longer have a semblance of their who they used to be. It, metaphorically speaking, it broke their minds. And so, as they put it, Neville's parents don't even recognize Neville as their son. And it is kind of sad, because Neville, as much as he and his grandmother, they visit his parents, but it's not like he can hug them and then they hug him back, or or give him a kiss and say I love you, son, or anything like that. Instead, they're just empty shells. I mean, it's not like with the mentors that they suck the souls out of people. It's just that they're broken, and Neville, there is no closure for him. Harry's parents were killed, but they were killed when Harry was 1 year old. So while he has the pain of having lost his parents and has a longing for a family, because the Dursleys obviously are not behaving as his family, but he might have that pain and longing for a family and for his parents. But in Neville's case, he has his parents, at least physically, but they're not there. They cannot bring him comfort. They cannot protect him. They cannot be there at even the best of times. They cannot enjoy his victories. They cannot give him advice. Neville can never truly have closure because his parents are still there, but they're no longer his parents. I mean, think about that. Imagine going home every single day and you have your parents, but they don't recognize you. They don't treat you like they're your parents. You're just another stranger. To you, they're important. But you to them, you are nobody really. How would that feel? At least to me, that is a worse outcome. And that is a worse pain than if Noel's parents were actually dead. And, if anybody who has had a parent who, or not just a parent, but it could be a grandmother or grandfather who has dementia or Alzheimer's, they might be able to relate to that, because when your parent or your loved one can't remember you, but you remember them, it hurts to see that they're no longer who they used to be, but you're powerless against it. There is no way for you to help them, recover. Obviously, Neville was expecting he hadn't told anybody because he thought that they were going to laugh at him. Obviously, it's not a funny situation. They don't laugh at him when they run into Neville visiting his parents. And it's kind of heartbreaking when they're leaving, when Neville and his grandmother, when they're leaving, because they only got there to drop off, I think it was like a flower or something, again, for the Christmas holidays. I think it's the mother who Neville had given her a candy or a gum. She gives Neville the wrapper. Rather than throwing the wrapper away in the trash, he puts it in his pocket. More like a memento that it's something that she is giving him. Kind of like a symbolic gesture that it's something that he won't throw away, because it's those small details that matter to him. I don't know. It's a heartbreaking part of the story, and I don't know. It gets me every time. Unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily in the movie, but it would have been a scene that's difficult to watch. But yeah. And anyway, if we go over to the when was it? So we continue the school term, and Dumbledore, he's basically chased out of his office. Well, not chased out, but they in essence find out about the Dumbledore's army. Somebody had told on them, basically. They were able to kind of give the list to Professor Umbridge. So she has a list, she has the names. They infiltrate and they find where they are while they're still in the room of requirements, and they kind of chase them down. When they catch Harry, Ron, Hermione, and they go up to Dumbledore's office, Dumbledore kind of sacrifices himself by saying, "Oh yeah, you're only aware of one meeting, so you can't say that they have had multiple meetings, which would be multiple violations." But as you know, Dumbledore, Professor Umbridge has the list. He says, "Okay, I'll confess, I did recruit all these students into Dumbledore's army because it has his name. So in order for his students to avoid punishment, he decides to put the blame on himself." And Professor Umbridge is like very ecstatic for it. So as they try to arrest Dumbledore, he disappears. Okay, you can't separate, but he does disappear. And in the movie, and I kind of like this from the movie, much better than how it is in the book. In the movie, Kingsley says, "You may not like him, but he got style." That indeed, Dumbledore has style. So now that the school is kind of alone and on their own, Professor Umbridge, she gets more tyrannical, right? Even to the point in which Fred and George, they kind of leave the school with a bang, a big bang. They leave the school. They even leave like certain parts of the school like filled as a swamp and all of that. And so, and the school is. And apparently, like most of the faculty, they don't agree with Umbridge, so they'll have her resolve the issues because we don't know anything, or because there was some conflict between they should stick to their subjects only, and so they would say, "Oh yeah, we need you to fix this because that's not part of our subject." So that's kind of like the malicious complaints, if you will. But also, yeah. You know, even Professor Flitwick, he lives like a patch of swamp in memory of Fred and George. But anyway, it gets to the point in which Harry wants to talk with Sirius because there's something going on. He again had a particularly bad dream, except that this time he actually sees Sirius in this room, and he is inflicting pain on Sirius. Well, that's from his perspective, right? In the dream. And he's not that happy. Now, he had been taking some extracurricular classes with Professor Snape for occlumency, which is like a mind of the art to block people from infiltrating your mind. Obviously, that didn't work, and rather than help, it seems like it affects Harry even more because he becomes more susceptible to the dreams. And this is where I disagree with Hermione because she does say a lot that, you're not trying your best. But if you've ever had a migraine, you would know that, it's not as easy as, okay, I'm not going to take anything for migraines or I'm going to be back to my usual self. If your head hurts, your head hurts. You are not in your best of shape. Anyways, so he tries to contact Sirius, and the way he does is that he kind of contacts several members of the Dumbledore's army to cause a diversion. Well, he goes in and uses the only fireplace that's not being watched by the Ministry, and that would be the fireplace in Professor Umbridge's office, not the headmaster's office. The school apparently doesn't recognize her as the headmistress, so they have that part locked up from Professor Umbridge. She does find them over there. I'm going to skip over a lot because, again, I'm over that hour mark. I'm going to have to break this down a bit. But yes, basically when she catches Harry in her office, Hermione, in order to avoid more punishment, she kind of confesses. She says, "Yes, you caught us. Dumbledore had left us in charge of a weapon, but we don't know what to do with it." And Umbridge, obviously, she's very cocky. She's very, she overvalues herself too much. So she began saying, "Yeah, I know. Just show me where it is, and nothing will happen to you." Hermione and Ron, they lead Professor Umbridge into the forest. Harry doesn't have a clue what Hermione has planned. But what Hermione does is that she leads them deep inside the forest, and deep enough so that they are found by centaurs. The centaurs, they deal with Professor Umbridge, but Hermione does a mistake of saying, "Oh yeah, as I brought her in," because they asked them what they're doing there. And Hermione kind of does the mistake, which is a very dumb mistake, of saying, "Oh yes, I brought Professor Umbridge here so that you can deal with her." That insulted the centaurs, and they ran for their life. Anywho, because now they know that Sirius is no longer in Grima Place, Harry actually, if you remember the creatures that were pulling the carriages, that look like horses, but they're more bony, and then they have bat wings. Okay, so Harry is able to kind of get those horses, which are called Thestros. I was putting a blank there. Thestros. Which apparently, if you witnessed a death, if you witness somebody dying, that's how you are then able to see Thestros. Now, he was intending on flying on his own, but Hermione didn't let him. In that moment, Ron and Ginny and Luna and Neville, they catch up with them, and they fly off. They reach the Ministry, which is alone at this point, which, fair enough. I mean, if it's already time to leave, office hours are office hours, so anyway, so they go in and they look for this place. So they go deep in the dungeons, and then they find this location, which is called the it's called the Room of Mysteries. No, the Mystery Department, something like that. And it's basically where they investigate like various abnormal things or mysterious magical things. And when they reach this location, where with the door that Harry had been dreaming of all this time, he finds that it's a place that actually has crystal balls, and not just crystal balls. Apparently, they are prophecies, and so if a seer has a prophecy, these prophecies are kept inside these crystal balls, which the Ministry will keep on a shelf. And the only person that can actually touch these objects from the shelves are the people that the prophecies are made to. So, for example, the prophecy that Harry ends up finding, which is where Sirius was supposed to be, but he's not there, has his name, and it has Voldemort's name on it, which means that either Voldemort or Harry has to grab that prophecy. If anybody else tries to do it, they'll suffer. They will suffer. And so, at that moment, they are surrounded by Death Eaters, who had been waiting all this time. And Harry, at this point, already has the prophecy in his hand. And there's a chase sequence, and they arrive to this mysterious room, which is the way that it's described and the way that it's also pictured in the movie. It's more like an auditorium, and similar to like an auditorium that you find in schools, for example, where at the bottom a portion of the auditorium, you have this platform where a speaker can step up and do their thing. And then people sit on what look like the stairs, or, you know. Anyway, so what ends up happening is that there's a massive fight between Harry, the other members of the Dumbledore's army, and the Death Eaters. So they're fighting. Once they're surrounded, happily to save the day, the Order of the Phoenix arrive, and now they're more even and they start fighting. Even Sirius arrives to help Harry to save him. Well, here's the thing. Sirius doesn't come out clean out of this fight. Actually, he doesn't even come out of the fight at all. And I don't just mean as in spiritually, but also like physically. In this auditorium where they were, there was an arch. And this arch, it looks like it had like a very transparent blanket on. And it's they couldn't see what was behind or inside the arch. Even if you go back and forth, you don't see anything, but with that like blanket or curtain that's really translucent, you can't really see what's through that curtain. And so when Bellatrix, who had escaped Azkaban along with several other Death Eaters, she managed to not just kill Sirius, but he went through the curtain. Now, many things start to happen at once, but in essence, Bellatrix runs away. Harry follows her. They're in the main lobby of the Ministry, and Dumbledore appears. And again, Voldemort tries to kill Harry. At that point, Dumbledore arrives. He fights Voldemort, and you can really tell why Voldemort is afraid of Dumbledore, because they're very much on par one with each other. No matter like the tricks and the spells and the charms that Voldemort is using, Dumbledore doesn't even flinch. I mean, I'll just say this: Voldemort tries to take 2 steps forward, Dumbledore takes 2 steps forward, and doesn't let him move side to side. So they are very much on equal foot. No matter like the types of spells that they were casting and all of that. But then Voldemort, he seems to retreat, except that he doesn't. Voldemort tries invading Harry's mind. And at that point, it's no longer a secret that what Harry has been feeling, and when he feels that pain in his head, and when he feels these strong emotions and anger, is not just him. He is actually feeling inside, because his mind and Voldemort's mind are deeply connected. Which is why if Voldemort feels a strong emotion, Harry can also feel it. No matter if he's in Hogwarts with all the magical charms and protections, they are still connected in that manner. And so Voldemort tries to invade Harry's mind. So Occlumency failed. But there was this thing. Because Harry was ready to die, he said, if you're going to kill me, kill me. Do it now. Voldemort could not stand it. One, he's afraid of death. That much is clear. But also, having seen his godfather, his only connection to his parents, die, it pained Harry, because he loved his godfather. So now, with this feeling of love and this willing to die, Voldemort is not able to stand Harry, so he leaves and basically leaves Harry's mind. At that moment, Voldemort does show himself, but as the Ministry is, well, not just the Ministry, but it's the Minister and like all these other members of the Ministry come back to the ministry, they actually see Voldemort with their own eyes. They see that Harry was not lying. Harry and Dumbledore were not lying. And so Voldemort disappears in a flash. And what does Cornelius Fudge say? He's so brilliant, and Fudge actually is very eloquent. I mean, when he sees Voldemort and Voldemort disappears, he says the most interesting thing. He's back. I mean, obviously, he's back. Come on. Wake up. Come on. Stay on the same page. I mean, really, Fudge? Come on. Well, the last portion of the book is really just about Harry's bereavement. His going through the loss of someone else that he has loved. And it's a little bit different than from his parents. Again, when they were killed, he was 1 year old. But with Sirius, he had been creating this connection. And his loss, he felt it. When they go back to the school, Harry isolates himself once again, but no longer due to anger, but now because he is in pain. He has grief. In the movie, when Harry talks to Luna, because they happen to cross paths, she explains her story, and when they talk, it's very much at the beginning of the movie, or at least in like the first half hour or something like that. In the book, it's not until this moment where it's already end of term, they're having their last dinner before they would have to go back to their homes over the summer. And he finds Luna, and Luna's not having dinner. It looks like that she's looking for her belongings, her shoes, her books, and stuff that she wants to pack. But because the other students were playing tricks on her, she has to find them. This is where Luna reveals that the reason she can see Thestros is because she saw her mother at a young age. She saw her mother die from an explosion. The way she puts it is that her mother would experiment with different things, and in one time, and it's all it took, something went wrong and it exploded to her face, and she passed away. So now she only has her father. And this is when Harry starts feeling sorry for Luna. Because she doesn't get the special treatment of, oh, she is the chosen one, you know, how he gets sometimes. But, and it gives Harry some perspective. That he is not the only one who has lost somebody that he loves. He's not the only one. And the important takeaway, as Luna puts it, is to not be alone. Because if you're alone, you are powerless. If you have your friends, if you have other people, you draw from their strength, and you're stronger. And in order to face the threats, which is Voldemort, you have to have people that you rely on. Harry gains this perspective, and rather than stay closed off in his grief, he seeks out his friends, Ron and Hermione. He reconciles with them, and he says he's sorry. He goes back to them because they're his friends. When they go back, and obviously there's a big takeaway with Dumbledore, but that'll probably be more appropriate for what happens on the next book. They go over the summer, and well, that's kind of the end of the book. Again, in this book, Harry goes through a lot of emotions. what would be nice is to see, well, what was nice, I should say, was that in the book, you see him go through the emotions. You do see this roller coaster and kind of like this tippy toe around him because he gets angry all the time. How, and the movie does a good job as well. And, I can't nitpick that much with the movie because so many things happen that if they went by the book, page per page, it would have ended up being a very long movie. And it already is a long movie, so no. I give them credit, and I don't. I'm not really saying being too harsh on them. But again, you do start seeing that it's not just what happens in school. You do have a bigger picture here. You do start seeing what is happening in the wizarding world, because outside the Quidditch Cup and outside, the school, there is a life. And when you see that part of the problem that the community faces, the magical community faces, is that there is kind of this underlying belief of supremacy. Wizards and witches and wizards believing that they are better than other magical creatures, and that for some reason, just by the fact that they have a wand, that they can force others to be under their rule, that they have to control. Taking lands away from centaurs, forcing giants to stay in a confined location where they're beating themselves to death, or beating each other to death. Not doing anything to protect creatures such as house elves, not respecting goblins, or that type of thing that brings resentment. And that's kind of what Voldemort would feed on when he was in power. Voldemort would feed on this resentment that other magical creatures have. So during those times, those dark times, it wasn't just Voldemort, who was already a menace on his own, but he has Death Eaters who also subscribe to this idea. He also had giants. He had Dementors. He had other creatures who were willing to go against the wizards, who aimed at making them submissive to them. And this is kind of a theme that, from here on out, is clearly obvious. I mean, you do see some of it in Chamber of Secrets, but from this book, you start seeing this type of attitude rise more and more. But I'll leave it at that. What do you think? I mean, I know I've rambled on quite a bit and I've been all over the place, but what do you think? I mean, what did you like? What didn't you like? What else is there to all of this? I don't know. You tell me. All right, so, yeah, I guess I'll leave it here. I have nothing else to say, and hopefully this podcast forum works well. I'm having fun just talking, basically, even though nobody's listening. But yeah, what do you think? And yeah, all right. Talk to you later. Bye bye.